Reaction to a Local 15 News reality check that is getting results. 4 accused cockfighters in Mobile County are now facing federal charges after we exposed an illegal animal fighting operation south of Citronelle. Tonight, one animal rights group says the federal indictment sends a strong message.
And they basically get stabbed so many times till one dies and then it's declared one.
Local 15 News went undercover and documented illegal cockfighting derbies in Mobile County. The feds took notice, busting the operation last summer. We were there as federal agents searched the compound on Hutto Road. Now, months later, 4 people face charges ranging from sponsoring animal fighting to destruction of federal evidence. All 4 pled not guilty this week.
This sends a strong message to those involved in cockfighting, especially in the state of Alabama, that they're not above the law.
The Humane Society of the United States says the operation near Citronelle was significant. Tens of thousands of dollars exchanged hands at every fight, and thousands of birds were brutally killed for amusement. The federal indictment notes how the Alabama Game Fowl Breeders Association raised money at cockfights to help lobby lawmakers in Montgomery to keep state cockfighting laws weak. It mentions how they had a, quote, friend who was a state representative. The group's secretary, Chelsea Ann Helm, is one of the 4 named in the indictment.
You have a group that is for cockfighters, that is a registered nonprofit in the state, that is raising money at an illegal cockfighting venture to fight legislation. We've known this for years. I'm happy that the FBI recognized that as a serious issue.
And the Humane Society of the United States says there are other animal fighting operations in our area.
Tonight, Local 50 News has uncovered a mistake made during a recent repaving project in Midtown. That mistake on Government Street blocked storm drains that are vital to keep water off the road. Local 15's Andrea Ramey joins us in studio. Andrea, Aldot was quick to fix the problem.
That's right, Kim. Crews dug out chunks of asphalt like this that blocked the storm drains, 8 total along Government Street.
Might have to cut that out some more.
Crews shoveled asphalt after sawing into the street today. Aldot says 8 storm drains were covered, 2 almost completely in the latest resurfacing project that started in January and ended in March.
They sealed off the drains.
We became aware of the issue when viewer John Rouse noticed the water wasn't draining properly and took pictures of the covered storm drains.
Flooding down all the water piles down Mohawk Street. And when it really rains, it really gets at least a foot deep.
We told Aldot about the covered drains yesterday.
As soon as we found out about it, there were a handful of people that went out and looked at it, and I got our crews and we jumped out there first thing this morning and started correcting.
Mobile Asphalt was awarded the $350,000 paving contract and did the work. But Aldot says its own inspectors should have caught the mistake, and the agency may eat the cost of fixing it.
It should be a minimal cost, one day to get out there and do some work with some equipment, some man hours. I'm glad it was finally brought to our attention. I'm glad we're able to finally get out there and fix it, but I hate that it happened.
Aldot says in the few months the storm drains were covered, the agency did not receive any complaints about standing water in the road. And we want to thank John for bringing this issue to our attention.
In this morning's reality check, Local 15's Andrea Ramey uncovers a loophole that allows sex offenders to travel freely. And she finds out how investigators try to keep track of them all.
I need to check your ID and your driver's license.
It's a hot, muggy Thursday morning in June, and these volunteers are checking out this shack in Irvington.
And that's all we needed. Thank you.
To make sure the 53-year-old sex offender who molested a 14-year-old boy is staying where he says he is. And while we're here, we notice there's kids on the property. What if there's other kids? It sounds like there's kids here. What if there's...
Well, I'm going to put that in my notes here.
Okay, that you've noted that there's children staying here. Can they have children?
Not supposed to have any other than his.
John Lamb and Philip Smith are part of the Mobile County Sheriff's Office Volunteer Corps.
We're out 3 days a week.
They, along with 18 other volunteers, do random spot checks of sex offenders. Today, we're following them along.
Is he at work?
Yes, sir. So this one checks out.
Yes, ma'am.
But when we get to this Chanchula home, a gate blocks off the driveway.
This is Philip Smith with Mobile County Sheriff's Office.
If you're at home, please walk up to the gate.
They leave a note for the offender who sexually abused a 14-year-old girl, instructing him to check in. There are more than 700 sex offenders in Mobile County, and in addition to the spot checks, offenders are required to check in quarterly at a kiosk at the sheriff's office. Some offenders are more challenging to track than others. For example, offender James Broughton is homeless. His listed address is here in the middle of this downtown intersection. But the only thing here is the post office and some parking lots.
The only way we can really track them is just make them come in here once a week and keep us apprised as to where they're staying, whether it be at a shelter or, if they're living on the street, they tell us they're living on the street.
In Mobile County right now, there are at least 12 sex offenders. Investigators have no idea where they are. A third of them are homeless.
He was a frequenter of that complex. He was not unknown to our victim.
But in the case of Naomi Jones, the suspect, Robert Howard, was considered a compliant sex offender in Alabama. In fact, the Escambia County Sheriff's Office says the day after Naomi's disappearance, Howard came to the department to do his quarterly check-in. Chief Deputy Mike Lambert believes Howard was taking advantage of a loophole in Alabama's sex offender laws that allow them to be away from their homes for up to 72 hours without telling anyone.
This is a law that needs to be changed. Here's a loophole here that allows a registered sex offender to up to 3 days without reporting.
Pat Guyton with the Child Advocacy Center says it's vital we know where sex offenders are because it's estimated up to half will sexually abuse again.
Convicted sex offenders have a great recidivism rate.
Guyton believes offenders should check in if they're going to spend just one night away from their registered address and report in if they leave the state.
Otherwise, these people can move back and forth across state lines just like this guy did, and the people in Florida may have no idea they have a registered sex offender in an apartment living with someone, and no one in the apartment knows it either.
We told local lawmakers about this loophole, and there appears to be interest in addressing this issue next legislative session. We will follow up to see if the law changes. Andrea Ramey, Local 15 News.
Now to a shocking twist about Mason's past. This is the second time he has been accused of killing a young woman.
Investigators say his first victim was 17-year-old Misha Anglin, who was also shot in the head.
Local 15's Andrea Ramey spoke with Anglin's sisters about Mason's disturbing past and how they feel the justice system has failed.
In the early morning hours of June 2nd, 2002, a single gunshot was fired into this window on Bayfront Court in Mobile.
I heard the gunshot.
Sisters Keisha Anglin and Asa Wright raced into the room where their mother and sister Misha had been sleeping.
I never just noticed that Misha wasn't moving the whole while we were talking in the room.
Soon it became apparent something was horribly wrong with Misha.
I shook her and she didn't move, and I grabbed her arm and her arm just lifeless.
Misha had been shot in the head with a .22 caliber weapon as she slept in the bed with her mother.
I do remember her last breath. I can remember it kind of sounding like she had like air bubbles, and her body just exasperated. And after that, I think everybody in the room just kind of lost it. We all started screaming.
That same feeling that we felt then, I feel right now, just to actually, sit here and talk about it.
Misha Anglin was only 17 years old, a recent graduate of BC Rain High School who had big plans to go to college with her twin sister Keisha and later up their own hair salon together.
The night before she got killed, a couple hours before, she was so happy.
After her funeral, the family received a chilling letter in the mail.
The very first sentence said, "After a year of planning, I finally succeeded." That was the first sentence in his letter. You picture a devil with horns and dark eyes writing this letter. It was just that horrifying.
It was a confession letter, giving investigators what they needed to arrest Misha's ex-boyfriend, Steve Mason.
Who else was it going to be? My sister didn't have any enemies.
But in a stunning courtroom twist, Steve Mason requested youthful offender status, meaning the maximum sentence, if convicted, would just be 3 years in prison. And in 2003, Judge Rusty Johnston granted it.
I'm trusting Judge Johnston that, you know, the decision he made was right. I just got to trust that.
What I should have said is I'm trusting God.
Against the family's wishes, Steve Mason was able to go on and live a normal life, get a job at Mobile Infirmary where Kayleigh Morris worked. All records of his past murder arrest sealed.
He was able to say, well, I can do it again and get away with it.
In 2015, a news report got their attention.
A Mobile woman remains in critical condition at this hour.
Kayleigh Morris was shot in the head Monday night outside the Arlington Park Apartments.
Hospital officials have confirmed a woman shot outside her apartment has passed away.
Another young, beautiful woman found shot in the head in Mobile.
I told my husband, I said, turn that off. I hate to hear about that happening to young women. I hate to hear it.
Later, they would learn someone very familiar to them, Steve Mason, was a suspect in the case.
This girl's family, they shouldn't be going through this. She should be at work right now, you know, planning her life, planning a wedding, having a baby. She should be living a life. If the justice system would have done what they were supposed to do with a premeditated murderer.
Now, 15 years later, 2 murders and 2 families forever connected by one murder suspect. One decision made by a judge about the night a single shot was fired into this window.
I hope his conscience rots him. I really does. I hope this rots him, and I hope he sees Keely's face and Misha's face for the rest of his life. I really do. I really do.
Andrea Ramey, Local 15 News.
Local 15 News has been following this story since it broke 2 years ago.
You can see our full coverage, including our in-depth look at Steve Mason on a way to protect your home from burglars.
According to Mobile crime stats, there were an average of 7 burglaries a day last year. That's almost a 20% increase from the year before.
Local 15's Andrea Ramey investigates different ways to reinforce your doors and found one that works. That's in this reality check.
It took little effort to bust through this locked front door. The reason? Short screws. The screws that come with most door strike plates are short, a ½ inch or less, that only go into the door frame, not the stud.
So it's really not doing too much?
No, ma'am.
So we tried using longer screws. Installing 3-inch stainless steel screws that went into the stud, supposedly making it much harder to kick in. And it was tough for me. But the longer screws were no match for our chief photographer, Mike Corey. After just a few kicks, the screws bent and the door flew right open.
I've seen them have both, and the door just kick right in.
Knowing how to stop burglars is crucial. According to the FBI, the Mobile area has a high burglary rate, ranking in the top 10% of metro areas for burglaries in the country in 2015. Worried we'd exhausted all options, we contacted Imperial Locksmith. Owner Robert Stout showed us this. It's called a jam enforcer.
You basically would just line it up here with the holes in the door, and then you would drill in your screws all the way down. That way when they kick the door, like I said, the force goes this way, this way.
You can hire a locksmith to install one, or you can make it a DIY project and buy a similar one at Lowe's for $50, which is what we did. The kit came with 7 3-inch screws that we installed in the same door Mike Corey busted right through. We already knew my kicks weren't going to do much. But what about when Mike kicked it? And kept kicking it. It didn't budge, so we tried it as a team. Despite our best efforts, the door stayed put, proving this $50 purchase was well worth it.
I don't think it's going down.
One more time.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
It's a pretty tough item.
The average dollar loss per burglary, according to the FBI, more than $2,300 for victims.